Welcome back. On this episode of Family Twist, we're joined by Emily, a fellow New England podcaster whose DNA surprise began with a wedding video and a simple question: why am I in my parents' wedding? That moment launched decades of searching, from a Dunkin Donuts paternity test to a shocking identical twins twist. Emily shares the weight of family shame, the silence of a mother who cannot talk, and the reality that reunion is rarely the fairy tale we imagine. Along the way, Kendall opens up about his own experience, what it felt like when his adopted family's support clashed with relatives who wanted him to stop searching, and how reunion with his birth father brought both joy and frustration. Together, these stories highlight the right to know your origins, the pain of parents who aren't quite curious enough, and the ways that humor, music, and community help us bridge the silence.
Welcome, Emily, to the Family Twist podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you, not just because we're interested in your story, but we're all members of the New England Podcasters Group, which awesome organization, been around for a little over a year now. And anyone out there who has a podcast and you live in New England, I encourage you to check them out or check us out, and I'll put links in the show notes. But how did you hear about the group, Emily?
We keep trying to figure it out. It was somehow Amy, of course. She is like the pro cheerleader for that group. But I got to say, I don't usually do groups. Like, I'm not a group person. And I love New England Podcasters Group. So there is some sort of special magic.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, so welcoming, so helpful. And I think that might be why we aren't involved in a lot of groups, because it's not salesy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very just like a community collaborative. Let's celebrate each other. Let's help each other, all the good stuff.
Yeah, agreed.
So even though we were part of the group, we had no idea that you've got a DNA surprise. How did you discover this?
Okay, so how did I discover the surprise?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I grew up not knowing that my dad was not my dad, the person that my mother married. And you have to forgive me because I know that some of your guests use the right terms and I don't know any of them. So despite having done a lot of research, I still don't know all these terms.
That's okay.
Yeah, well, I don't even know if we say the right terms. And there's new terms added every day.
It's funny because as a little girl, as a 3-year-old, I remember my mom dating my dad, and I remember calling him David, but I don't remember that was weird at all. You just don't. You're a little kid. So I didn't know for a long time. And one day I used to watch my parents' wedding video over and over and over again because I just was obsessed with it. I was watching it with my friend and she's like, "Why are you in your parents' wedding?" And I was like, "I don't know. Aren't all kids in their parents' weddings?" I'll ask my mom. So I asked my mom and she said, "Well, your dad actually didn't just choose me. He chose you and he adopted you." And so she's like, "Here's your birth certificate. We changed your name over from my maiden name to his name. And that's that." So I asked well, if he's not my real dad, who is my real dad? What is the story here? And basically the way it was told to me, it was a lot of shame. My parents were they came from a very religious background. There was a lot of shame in whatever this big, deep, dark secret was. And the way it was posed to me is that my mom had an interaction with somebody she was working with at the time, and bada bing, bada boom, then I'm in the world. So that was kind of it. And that was when I was 8 or 9 years old. And so by the time I was 11, I just could not stop thinking about this. And I'd be looking for him in everybody's face, which that actually never stopped. I'd be like, "Who is he? Do I know him?" And so when I was 11, I started really trying to figure out, I'm going to ask her more questions. I'm going to figure out who this person is. She gave me a name and I held on to that name from 11 to 21. And then I was like, okay, I'm finding this person. So I can pause or I can just keep on going down that road if you want.
Let's keep on going.
Okay. So I'm 21 years old and I start Googling this guy's name. It's a common name. And if I'm allowed to use names, I'll use it. It was Norm Scott. So it's kind of a common name. So I'm looking and I finally find a couple that I'm okay, this is the right age range, the right area in Maine. He would have lived around my mother at the same time. So I narrowed down to one person. I find his family on Facebook, his 2 daughters, contact them, and they did not appreciate me contacting them. The circumstances under which I was supposedly conceived were like really bad. So their mother was dying of breast cancer and their father and my mother worked together. So they were not like very inspired to meet me, but they also knew that I would come looking for their dad and they connected me to him. We got together thanks to my grandmother, like bringing me to meet him. And we met at a Dunkin Donuts in Lisbon Falls. Then we went to go take a paternity test. After that first conversation with him, I was like, oh, 100%. Like, he is definitely the one, like, no question. And he knew it. Like, he's like, yes, I always knew you'd come looking for me. So we take this paternity test. And don't you know, it comes back 0.0000001% chance that he is the father. And I'm like, well, that 0.0001%, maybe he is. And they're like, that's not how it works, honey. So I'm back to the drawing board at that point. And, you know, I always still wondered, and I asked my mom, it's not him. So you need to fork over some names here. And she said, basically, she doesn't remember, she doesn't know, but she used this phrase of, I don't even remember the name of the friend that I went to the party with. Like, she used that, and I never let that go. So fast forward to my 30s, I think I'm like 31, 32 at this point. My husband got me a 23andMe for Christmas. The goal of it was to kind of figure out, like, we all sort of thought I had like this very like exotic gene or something. I was like, ooh, I'm definitely going to be something exciting because I don't look like anybody else in my family. So he got me this 23andMe, and I am very unsurprisingly highly French, Canadian, English, and Irish, like everybody else in the world. And not everybody else in the world, sorry. Everybody else in that area. So I take this 23andMe, and I didn't have any really close connections at all. Pretty much all of my connections on there were fourth cousins or third cousins, which was pretty frustrating. A fourth cousin did reach out to me. She lives in New Zealand, and we figured out she and I were connected on my mother's side. And she's really savvy in DNA. So she's like, I'm going to help you. She said, first thing you need to do, you need to get an Ancestry, you need to get GEDmatch, and then like I must have submitted it to like 3 other places. So I'm like $700 with the DNA swabs alone.
Wow.
And then she said, you really need to get somebody on your mother's side, because at the time, 23andMe and Ancestry, they didn't parse through mother-father unless you had a definite match. So she said I need to get somebody on my mother's side close, if I could, to take a test. So I got my aunt to take a test. And then it starts like being able to see who's on my mother's, who's on my father's. So I took everyone on my father's side that I possibly could, and I would either look at them on 23andMe or Ancestry and build their tree backwards. And Philippa, that's her name in New Zealand, she helped with this because there was a lot of it. Like, when you get to cousins, you're starting to look at like all of these different roads and paths you could take, and it could lead to like 7 different people. So she was really good at being like, you can eliminate that one because the last name won't get you where you want to go. So that took a long time. Like, my husband bought me the test in December, and I worked on that straight on through until March. I was just like at my computer every single day. I had a retail shop at the time. So when no customers were in the store, I was just like building trees. Like, I was dreaming in family trees, and there were a lot of suspects, if you will. So I would kind of get somebody, look at them on Facebook and be like, oh dear God, I hope that's it. Or like, I hope that's not it. Like, and, you know, you just have so many questions at that time. So finally, it was in March that we got a real breakthrough. There was a second cousin that came through on my dad's side on Ancestry, built his tree back, found a very unique last name, and then that last name took us to 3 options. The 3 options were an older gentleman who would have been probably 30 years older than my mother at the time, and then 2 identical twins, Stephen and Stuart.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So I didn't rule out the father, but I did reach out to their sister, and their sister was like, you're crazy. I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll ask them. So she asks her brothers. Both of them are like, no, we have no recollection of this. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Who is this person? Right? Like, is she just coming for our money? Yeah. So eventually, I convinced their sister to also take a DNA test with me. And I purchased one for her. It sat on her counter for like 6 months, and she never took it. And the conversation with me and Steven kept on going, kind of like, would you consider taking one as well? I really think there might be something to this. So he's like, it must be my brother because it's not me. The problem with identical twins is their DNA is also identical. But I knew at least if I could get him to take a test, then I would be able to say, well, it's at least one of the two of them. Right. Or it's their father. So I got him to take a test, and lo and behold, it said 50% match. That is the paternal father. So again, the problem is that we weren't still sure if it was him or his brother. But we met in December of 2018. That was a year later. I was the most nervous I have ever been in my life. He's an airline pilot, so he did an overnight in the town near me, and we met at a hotel bar. It was amazing. I remember the day after, it was the first time that my feet ever felt like they had hit the ground, connected to my head. Everything always had been very disconnected for me, and I would look in the mirror and be like, I don't see myself. It was just all very weird. And that was the first day I really started to see all these pieces of me kind of come together. So we still didn't 100% know, but he was best friends with somebody my mother was friends with also. And I said, why don't you just think, get your memory juices going or whatever. Think back to this neighborhood because this is where she lived. And I know she would be going to parties and stuff in that area. And it all kind of came flooding back to him. So,
oh, wow.
So I'll pause there.
That's a lot to unpack. But let's go back. I have a couple of questions. So the gentleman that you first thought might be your father, does that mean that he does have a child out there somewhere?
No, but he did have an affair with my mother.
Gotcha.
And actually, I do believe that I think he had a vasectomy. So I think the chances would have been really, really low anyway. So the odds would have been low anyway, but he still didn't put it past him.
Oh, gotcha. All right. I wasn't expecting the identical twin thing to pop up. So that's interesting. Okay. I think we're ready just to hear more.
Okay. So I'll share this because it gets a little weirder in synchronicities. So so I told my Nana, because she's been my avid supporter in finding this out. I did bring it up to my mother, and she's like, I don't know them. I knew them in high school. I went to high school with them is what she said, but I don't know them. So my Nana, when I said their name, she's like, oh my gosh. Okay, so his birthday is November 19th, 1963. My mother's birthday is November 20th, 1963. They were born in the same town, in the same hospital, and my Nana was having my mother next to, how the hospital rooms are separated by a curtain. They're in the recovery rooms after having their babies next to each other on those days.
Wow.
So it's a little crazy. They did go to high school together. It turns out all of them were in the exact same class. They all know my aunts. Their dad had a grocery store. My grandfather had a little general store. So they were the dueling family store, which is so funny. Theirs was a health food store. Ours was the opposite of a health food store. And so the birthday thing. And then I'm trying to think of what other kind of, his wife was really uncomfortable with this whole situation. I think she was the one initially being don't get together with this girl. What is happening here? I don't want to be thinking about your past and who you've been with and who you don't even remember that you've been with, So I think it was really, really hard on her. And I do understand. I try to put myself in her shoes a lot, actually. If that were to happen to me, how I would receive it. Her name is also Emily, which was a little funny.
Okay.
So I made a promise to my mother that I would never bring it up with her again because she's so highly uncomfortable talking about it. And it's such an area of shame for her, which I think that's been really hard for me. Steven is fantastic. I get along really, really well with him. I have a lot of similarities with him. I've met one of his children. He has two. And him and I are both really neurotically the same in lots of different ways. When we got together, I was like, oh my gosh, me too. We do the same gestures. That's a little weird. That's where you really get to see the nature nurture come through. and I enjoyed that experience. I felt like the nature piece of me was like really, really satisfied. Like, okay, this explains so much of why I've never really exactly felt like the perfect fit anywhere that I was. And he's not like the best at being like responsive. So like sometimes I'll like reach out and it'll be like weeks before he gets back to me.
Got
He
it.
doesn't remember my birthday. So there are still things where it's sad. Like you lost a lot of time with somebody that you could have had a great relationship with. And I'm not really great friends with my dad that my mom married. And I'm also not like best friends with my mom. I mean, we're good friends, but not like best friends. So I just feel like that part of me always kind of got lost. And I feel one thing I want to say is I had a very fairy tale happy ending in my head of like how this was all going to go, especially when I met him. I was like, this is amazing. Like we just hit it off. Everybody in the family I love, but it's just not that. Like it's really hard to merge. I've spent 40 years of my life almost like building it a certain way. And it's hard to be like, well, now we do Christmas with this random family that nobody else has any access to. So my relationship with him is really private and secret. And there's not a lot of people in my family that know about it.
Well, I mean, we can definitely relate to that because, we know of a situation close to us that's very similar. And I just can't imagine like how it feels for you, how it feels for your mother. Does it drive you crazy that you can't talk about it with her?
Yes, but I'm an extremely understanding person. What I don't understand as a woman is how you kind of don't remember something like that. Although I do understand that all kinds of substances and situations can be involved. So I do understand. I think it's sort of unfair when it's somebody else's life that is also impacted and it is so definitive of like who they are and who they're becoming. In my heart, I'm always so protective of my mother that I'm just like, I can't be mad at her at the end of the day because I don't believe that she really has a choice to be any other way. So,
Sure, sure. But at the same time, I mean, this is your right to know the truth. Do you think that she is upset with you for going as far as you did and actually making the discovery?
I think that they always really wanted me to go along with that my adopted dad was my dad. And like you should be grateful. He chose you. He chose both of us. Like this is such a gift. I really struggle to identify with him and his family. Like I am as far from the polar opposite as you can get. And so I think that this just added to that barrier. And I think that frustrated her. My mom is very close to him, like super, super close to him. And so I think that's always just been like a thing between us, So
Yeah.
I think she is. I think it's more like something like she's like, it's too painful for her to talk about or just too something for her to talk about. I don't even know what's blocking it, but she can't even really access it.
Well, I know all the adoptees listening cringed a couple of moments ago when you said that. You should be grateful because that's one of like the triggering things that
Yeah.
really gets people going. And it's like, I mean, we understand there's a lot of education to happen and it's hard for people to like put themselves into somebody else's head,
Yeah.
But those
I
kinds
don't-
of
I don't think-
insensitivities,
I don't think she realizes because she hasn't had to go through this. And I don't think you really can understand what it's like to not be able to put together your identity until you can't. And it is the most frustrating thing. And it's not like that defines me, but especially when you're young, it does. And you're just trying to figure out those pieces and like, who am I? And why am I like this? And answer all of those big life questions. And so when no one's like kind of being responsive to that, it can be really, really hard and frustrating. So
Yeah.
I knew before my parents died, my adopted parents both died really young. And I knew, though, that they were both supportive of my search.
Yeah.
Being an angsty teenager, when my mother had passed and then my father passed, my mother's adopted mother's sister, I told her, I'm going to continue to try to find biological family. She was the one that was offended. She was like, how dare you? And I said, wait. I know that mom and dad were cool with it. So you need to dial it back a notch. And till the day she died, before I found my family, she said, don't disrespect them. And I was like, Aunt Pat, you don't get to make that judgment for me.
Yeah.
You know your family. You know both sides. And it's not fair when I know that I had my parents' support to go on this journey. I'm going on it, and granted, I was beating my head against a wall back then. You know what I mean? I was probably just saying that to spite her at that point. But it was hard for me to show people grace when I was really going through it. I wish I hadn't been as demonstrative with her as I was, but that was just kind of her and my dynamic. And she did settle down a bit, but I know in her heart, she felt like I was disrespecting my adoptive family, and I wasn't.
Yeah. That's how I think my mom took it too. Yeah.
You can have positive memories, but still want to find the other side of the equation.
Yeah. And knowing that, I might not actually get a good answer on the other side of this equation. And I had that recognition many, many times as I was looking on Ancestry, and like I'd look somebody up on Facebook and be like, okay, this might not be the situation I thought it was going to be. And I still think it's as great as it could have turned out for me. I still don't think it's what I dreamed of. I think a lot of people are really wanting that relationship with one of their parents, and it can look all different ways for all of us. And I just think I really so craved that like when it didn't happen the way I thought it was going to happen, I was like, oh, another parent I don't really have a perfect relationship with. Right now I have 3, and none of them are exactly what I would want them to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a tough position to be in, for sure. Kendall and I were having a conversation over the weekend. We're working on fleshing out his story for a possible book or something along those lines. And I was asking him about, when I got him the DNA test that we made the discovery from, because at that point it had been, a long time where he had been looking, and I think at that point had pretty much given up. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, after that first, I'm not actually your dad situation, Emily, like, why did you wait so long after that to continue the journey?
Probably because I couldn't afford to go on to 23andMe in my 20s. I was not very good with money. So that's probably my answer. And I can't remember how much that first kit cost when my husband got it for me. I think it was like $200. But that was kind of when, and also I had the support of my spouse at that time saying, like, I want to help you now find this person. And like, this is really important and meaningful to you. So like, let me give you that gift so that you can take that next step. Because without that, I don't know if I ever would have invested in it for myself, or I would have waited a much longer time. And I would have kept looking at people's faces and being like, oh, maybe that's it. Maybe, which gets you nowhere. Because
right.
Especially when you have brown hair and brown eyes, you look like everyone up in Maine.
Has your husband been able to start forming a relationship with your father?
Yeah, actually, Stephen really loves my husband. He thinks he's fantastic. My husband and I have a hard time like traveling together just with our work schedules. So every time, for example, he would invite me to Florida, like I would want to go with my husband, but I would be like, well, I'm too scared to go by myself. So we just wouldn't go. But we did go up and visit them in Maine, and everybody was a big fan. And we're like kind of like the novelty when we go see everybody, So yes, they all very much love him, and he really likes their whole side a lot. Again, it's hard because now I'm like, okay, I want you to form a bond with this family, and we have your family. Like, let's form all the bonds with all the people. And he's very introverted. So I think that's kind of like, he wants to go deep with people, right? And not like as wide. So I prefer to have deeper relationships as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, I pretty much just like bulldoze my ways. It's like,
that has worked in our situation. In fact, I feel like when I first met my biological dad, I feel like Corey helped facilitate some of those conversations, because I'm one of those people, and I love my dad, don't get me wrong, but he is not inquisitive at all about anything. And I'm the kind of person, like, it needs to be back and forth, right? Like, I want to ask you about your life and I need you to ask me about mine. And he wouldn't. It would piss me off. And I'd be like, forget it, Corey. I'm not going to talk. And Corey would help. Yeah, he's a journalist. He'd almost like, hey, you both are sitting down. Why don't we talk about that? Or he'd facilitate the conversation. And we needed that because, to your point, I didn't realize how delusional I am about how all these things would go. I had just built this scenario where I'm the best thing since sliced bread and you just found me and you should realize how fantastic I am. And that's not the way it happened. I mean, people were receptive, but not at the level that I thought they should be. I was 47 when I made this discovery. I had developed this whole backstory, in my mind about everything, and nothing that I thought came true. So be careful.
Kendall,
Fantasies.
yeah, I really want to highlight that lack of inquisitiveness, and that is really frustrating. I mean, that is actually a huge letdown in any parental relationship, but especially this one, because you do think to yourself, like, oh my gosh, they're going to want to know everything. Like, they're going to want to know why I do this gesture and why I make this noise. And it's also important to realize it's not the same, because for us, it was a piece of who we are. And for them, it's sort of like an addition to who they are, right? Like for us, it's a missing piece. For them, it's an addition. And so my biological father is the same way. He's not inquisitive. And so I bring like lists of questions because I'm like, I have 20 topics. He doesn't reciprocate. And that is something I've just learned.
Yeah, we do.
It's funny that you say that because when I met my dad, what I found him doing sometimes was like trying to compare me to my local brother and sister, like his other two kids. And I was like, yeah, I'm not like either of them. You know what I mean? And that's kind of as far as his inquisitiveness went. And I was like, well, I could tell you more, but I'm just not going to. It's because you didn't ask.
Well, and when all else failed, I went to something that always works for us, and that's music. So I just remember one evening when Kendall's father was spending the weekend with us, and the three of us just kind of bonding over Carole King's Tapestry and singing along to it.
Yeah, in the den, all three of us.
Fun.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and it's Kendall's dad reminds me a lot of my dad too. A lot of the similar personality, So that was nice for me too, because my dad died when I was 17, so just having that sort of shared moment is kind of like a flashback, to that.
Yeah, I love that. And now you are all still friends with their family near where you live, yes?
It's complicated. In some instances, it's complicated, but yeah, I mean, we're still in relation with that whole side of the family, and then not as much on Kendall's birth mother's side, but we have his sister who is working in Connecticut right now, and so it's great. We got to spend a long weekend with Stephanie and two of our friends that have become really good friends of ours last month, and it just those moments are so magical and so memorable. It's like they remind you like why we did this in the first place and why it's worth the frustration and the ongoing drama and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of music, Emily, I don't know if you've been listening to the most recent episodes because we just started this not too long ago, but the question that we've been asking all guests on Family Twist is that when you were kind of going through the process, either searching for family or finding dead ends or finally discovering your dad, is there a musical artist that you lean on in times of frustration or trauma?
That's funny. Probably more in my angsty 20s that's probably when I used music for leaning on. But I will share a musical story. When I was going to meet him at that hotel bar restaurant, I had Cat Stevens' The First Cut is the Deepest playing, and I remember it like yesterday. Like I even remember like my hands on the steering wheel, like trying to calm myself down, doing like the back and forth and doing it to the beat of Cat Stevens. And I've always loved that song. So there we go. That's kind of relative to any trauma.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a song that a lot of people relate to for a lot of reasons. That's definitely a good one. Awesome. Well, Emily, thank you so much for being open to share your story. I think Kendall and I feel like we know you a little bit better now, which is great because we love the growing community of the New England Podcasters group. And so it's always wonderful to make a new friend. We can't wait to meet you in person.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me share. And you will remain in my ears until the next time we meet in person.
That sounds good. Thank you. Emily's story, alongside Kendall's, reminds us why Family Twist exists. DNA surprises aren't just about test results. They're about identity, belonging, and navigating silence. Emily faced the unique complication of identical twins and the heartbreak of a mother who shut down the conversation. Kendall shared his own version of that gap when reunion didn't match the fantasy he'd built over 47 years, and how even small moments, like singing Carole King's Tapestry with his dad, created the connection he longed for. If these stories resonate with you, please share this episode with a friend who might need it. You'll find links to resources and support groups in the show notes. And please subscribe, rate, and review Family Twist wherever you listen, because family secrets are the ultimate plot twist, and telling them helps us all feel less alone. The Family Twist podcast is presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications and produced by Habakawi Cabbage LLC.